Welcome. Good to see you all. Here we are yet again. For some of you, you've been patiently waiting for this training to roll around. For others, you're fresh out the gates of the last one. And what I'd like to do before we actually dive into anything, since there's some people here who may be more or less familiar with each other, I'd like to go around and just get introductions. And in the process, hear from each of you a little bit about what it is that calls you to want to continue and go deeper here with the source embodiment process. And whoever feels like they want to just jump in, we'll do it popcorn style.
Hi, everyone. I'm Christina, and I'm in Petaluma, California. And I've been, I guess, like doing the SEP work for a little over a year now. And it is just a very elegant, gentle, but profound accelerator for moving past like internal blocks that I have been running up against for a long time. And so I've had such great progress, just finding more ease and joy and health in my life. And I'm curious to see what's next. That's why I'm here.
Great.
Hello everyone, Sri here from Gurugram, India. Why am I here? I've been involved with the kind of classical yoga practices for a bit now. And once I got a taste of the whole transmission thing, it kind of really changed the game. And I don't know, got addicted to it in a way. And but as intense as it was, and as like it was very meaningful, but at the same time, it was always slippery. It was vague. I would have this really deep contact, and then it's next day it's gone. And having had it, I couldn't forget it, but I couldn't find my way back through my practices, and it was horrible. I felt why life introduced this thing to me. I was fine before. Now I've seen this thing, I can't forget it. But then there is no way in. And these people who are around it, who seems facilitated, are all having its theater around them. I don't want the theater. I want the thing. So it was, I went back and forth. Okay, it's slow, but it will work. Let's go back to practices. Fuck this thing. And then, I want this again. Back and forth, back and forth. And then, then this work here, an interesting thing was it didn't have the fireworks, but it clicked. I thought initially what I was told was you get enough of these things, you get as crazy as it gets, and then it will one day click into place. But I was around in rooms which was really completely crazy, but it didn't seem, no matter how many times it got whacked around, it didn't seem to stick. And I didn't know what was wrong, And here it was in a way very quiet, but then at the end of it, it clicked, and it was not some fuzzy stuff. It was not mystical, and it was very practical. And and that's what matters at the end of the day. I don't want a drug trip. I want to live my life, and that's what matters. So it's wonderful.
Beautiful. Thank you.
I'm Justina, and I just finished step 1 and really excited to see how this process works for shadow work. So I was really, really excited when it's specifically for that, because I think shadow work is always very challenging. So just curious to see how this process will assist that. I have had my connections mainly through my Kundalini yoga practice. So another reason for doing this is to just pursue different avenues of connection and to see which one resonates the most, which one I can access just, really easily. And then just kind of build build it all into my current practice. So thank you.
Thank you.
I also do. Oh, okay. We're here. I'm here in Santa Fe. My name is Amy, and I also do Kundalini yoga. And I really like the playful, modern, fun activations of this process. And I'm here because it's working. It's working in my life. It's bringing more flow, ease, grace, more breakthroughs, more embodied presence. And I really enjoy it. So that's why I'm here.
Thank you.
My name is Matt. I am coming to you from the island of Kauai in Hawaii. I went through the source embodiment process level 1 with Sri last year, and I'm a big fan of Justin and his work. I'm also a somatic therapist. I also teach yoga and do guided journey work. So this just fits right in both with my personal practice and my professional practice. And so happy to be here. Very happy that this is happening.
Me too. Thank you.
Hi, everybody. I'm Chris. I just did the level 1 training with Justin during February and March, and I really resonated with the practice and the work, and I've been wanting to continue that practice and deepen it and work on. I love the goals of this course being sort of oriented around shadow work and life purpose. That feels like a great next step for me. And yeah, I'm in Denver, Colorado.
Excellent. Thanks, Chris. And thank you, everyone. It's really great to be able to feel each of you here as we're getting started. And just appreciating, some of the themes that I'm hearing here is just an interest in being able to have this connection to source. But, particularly what Sri was referring to is, that having it and losing it. There's all different ways we can have it and lose it. And, the whole motivation that's behind the entire SEP program for me is really about how we find it and how we lose it, how we align and then misalign and then realign, right? And it's the finding our way back out of the woods, out of the darkness, out of the confusion. That's the pathway that is so important when it comes to integration and sustaining connection. And I have a teacher guide who I've heard say once before that anytime we're out of alignment, anytime we're feeling lost or disconnected, it's an indicator. As long as we're still in a commitment to alignment, to truth, to showing up for ourselves, any experience of misalignment is an indicator of a much deeper level of realignment than we've ever experienced before. And so in this way, integration isn't just about being able to, have it and never lose it. It's also about just basic development, continued growth and evolution. It's in this way, the version of us that wants to hold on to it learns that it really never has lost it in the first place. And this is how we mature spiritually and in terms of our humanity. I'm just going to make a quick adjustment. Is my volume on the microphone okay? Yeah. Okay, great. So within all of this, phase one, I designed in a process to help establish at a technical level, to be able to help us establish that consistent, sustained direct access to source, as it relates to how we can engage with our life force, with our source connection at a physical, felt sense level. Right. And having these tools and techniques is obviously powerful enough for each of you to be showing up here. But recognizing that there, of course, is so many more nuances to this process than simply knowing the trick. Right. And recognizing also that there's a couple ways to describe this. Whatever your creative expression is, whether it's you're a painter or a musician or a martial artist or what have you, as they say, it's the 10,000 movements of any practice that help it to become a part of who you are, that help it to become something that's mastered. And so we go through the more kind of basic rudimentary expression, and the more we learn what the step is or what the moves are, the more we begin to learn how to relax our attention, our effort in trying to get it right. And it's in that place that our greater mastery or our greater artistic expression finds its way through. And that, or we could say that source has a way of moving through us. And so this is a dance between effort and surrender. The activation work is a surrender-based practice. The exercises that we learned to integrate it required effort, right? And I try to design things in a way that are as minimal as possible in terms of the effort that we need to exert, but yet there's still that natural, will and grace, exactly. The everyone's favorite 2000 sitcom. Anyways, and so within that, there is this aspect of recognizing, even though we want to be able to self-realize, even though we've made an identity around being on this path of awakening and development, there's nothing that can be gamed in this process. It's nothing. There is no trick in terms of the real opening to source and the real expression of source. We can learn its language, but it's really up to it if it wants to talk to us. And so how we engage in terms of where we're at in relationship to our longing, our desire for that communion, our trust that it's there, and our willingness to be in a state of humility and studentship. And this is what allows for the conversation to continue to deepen over time. And so I can offer everything I can to get us to that place of being as available as possible. But it's really here in the center of our own heart that natural movement towards source, towards union or reunion for that matter, really takes place. And so, of course, there are all these mechanics and techniques that we studied in phase one that have been helpful and meaningful. But I'm guessing that you've each had your own experiences outside of having that intentional practice where something shows up and says, oh, hey, wow, there's something moving here that wasn't before I started learning this language. Despite whatever wide range of practices we've all done and traditions we've all had some exposure to. There's something moving here. And the relational dimension to deepening our connection here to source. The pathways of our attachment systems, our relationship styles, are we an introvert or an extrovert? Do we tend to be more avoidant or more anxious when it comes to intimacy? These kinds of things. All of these pathways here, we're going to continue to work with at a much deeper level than we had in phase one, and a much more personal level. This is the main distinction: is phase one is a series of tools and teachings that just about anybody who's sensitive to this energy can apply. Right. But for each of you at the end of phase two, you're each going to have your own unique pathways to continue to connect and re-engage at a very personal level. Because where we connect and disconnect is all very much based on the relationship patterns we've experienced. Sorry, let me make that a little more clear. How we connect to source, given that source initially is the womb of our mother, and then eventually the family of our parents, the home of our parents. These are primary connections to source. The circuitry that gets laid down here, the pathways that created in these dynamics, are the filter at which we continue to connect and engage with source as we mature the rest of our lives. So it's through that perspective, it's through that channel that we have either the access that helps us to get our needs met, or the disturbances or distortions that make it difficult for us to find and establish that sense of connection. You know, and traditionally speaking, and this may be the case in some modern cultures more than others, but traditionally speaking, there would be an initiation as we're coming of age from childhood to adulthood, where that pathway to source that we were receiving through our caregivers would be cut and then reestablished directly to source itself, unmitigated. Right. And so you go through your rite of passage, there's a confrontation with death or some sort of sense of finality to being in this human form. And every time when we would experience something like that as kids, we would turn, look over our shoulders, and our parents would be there to hold us until a certain point where it's our turn now to be able to hold and provide for the village or the community. And so now there would be some guide to be able to say, okay, you can't go that way anymore. This is the new way. We have to go direct to source without having the middleman or the mitigator, the arbiter. And so now it's in this way you can receive your empowerment that allows you to be able to show up in service to the greater community. Right. And so this is what we're wanting to establish in some ways with this training here. But given that we are who we are in this modern society, and there's so many other complexities that we're navigating that our ancestors never had to contend with, you know, it's fitting that we find ourselves here in this group where we're able to there's a couple different layers here. We're able to both establish a deeper connection and a wider connection at the personal level to support who it is that we're here to be and how it is that we're here to serve in the world as individuals. And also that we're doing this at this time in history where we are in a state where the old systems and institutions and power structures that have been our source for sustaining our lives in one way or another, providing the agricultural, you know, systems and financial systems and economic systems to take care of the village. All those systems are crumbling at this chapter in our history. And again, speaking traditionally, anytime there's been any major shift in human consciousness, it always starts with some form of communal, trance-based, channeled, what have you, or some form of altered state of consciousness that supports getting out of the way of the old paradigm to allow whatever new downloads or visions or inspirations want to be presenced through a very right brain, creative, what's the word I'm looking for? Just general intuitive process in relationship to our bodies and the earth. And here we are at the stage where all these institutions are kind of fracturing. There was a time at this beginning of this chapter that is now completing. You have Christ in the desert, you have the Prophet Muhammad. They all received their visions, and from that place, a new paradigm was born. And then that paradigm was codified into some kind of text that was the structuring of this energetic transmission, essentially. And over time, that structuring calcifies and then eventually crumbles. And so here we are again. The whole notion of democracy as we know it in the West, and the left brain, rational, pragmatic value of reason. All of this comes from a right brain, goddess-based, earth-based celebration of life force. If we go back to the roots of ancient Greece, where all that came from. So again, one chapter of civilization yielding to the complexities of the next chapter. And in that next chapter, there's tremendous amount of energetic information that the beings that gave rise to the next chapter of institutions all were in this energetic direct transmission based relationship too. So I feel like I'm kind of rambling a little bit here, but my point with all of this is that, as we are engaging in this process here, of course, we are also supporting and participating in the collective field that we're a part of today. And so it's my hope that as we're leaning into these themes that we'll be getting into, I'll break them down in a second, getting into our purpose and learning how to metabolize our shadow, that this gives this supports a kind of opening possibility for others in our collective to be able to find their way and to participate in their own way as well. So that's a mouthful, but just to ground it here and what we're really going to be getting into at a practical level. The focus here is really going deeper into the question of who am I? This is as a realization process. When we are in the inquiry of who am I or what am I, sometimes a better question. There is a focusing and a directing of attention to the center. And it's in that focusing, directing of attention to the center that what we are not, in terms of our conditioning or in terms of this life trauma, our past life trauma, our ancestral trauma, blah, blah, blah. It's in that focusing of our attention towards the center inward that these other things that we are not can purify, can clarify. And it's in the forgetting of that inquiry of who I am that we tend to identify with what we're not, which is what perpetuates our karma, which is what perpetuates the human condition that we're in on planet Earth today. So if I'm identifying with my fears or my limitations rather than my potential, then my experience is reflective and creating feedback loops based on that. Whereas if I'm identifying with the simple inquiry of who I am, what we have, traditionally speaking, this is what gives rise to a Kundalini activation, naturally, organically on its own. And so since we're in this place here where all of our Kundalinis are flowing in the way that they are, that we can come together in this community and focus around this single point of life force, source. It's a beautiful, inspiring thing because it opens up a lot of access to a sense of what's possible. But of course, it's in that some of you have did phase 2 or phase 1 a while ago. You may have a little more experience with it than the people who have just done phase 1, but the more we get clear on what we are, what we're not, has a way of asserting itself to there's a lot of reasons for this, which we'll get into, but what we are not has a way of coming to the surface to really, in some ways you could say, to deepen our commitment to truth, deepen our commitment to realization. And so the shadow is what, how do I say, is here for two purposes. One, in its own, its purpose is to protect itself and to sustain itself. But in its function for our entire being, it's to drive our evolution. Right? So whatever it is that we're here to be, whatever it is that we're here to do, it's in the wound that we get the information, that we get that clarity. It's wherever it is at an emotional level, we feel disconnected or divided from source. That in the allowing of that wound, in the holding of that wound, the compassion, the forgiveness, the permission of that wound, that there's an indicator here of what our soul came here on this planet to learn. Right. And so it's not about, oh, if I could just get rid of that thing, or if I could just heal it and then move on and do all these other things. They're two sides of the same coin, right? Our soul's purpose and our soul's wound are two sides of the same coin. And so as we're refining what it is that we're here to do, if we're wanting to feel supported, if we're wanting to feel the grace of spirit, helping to clear and illuminate our path forward, it's looking over our shoulder that we get a sense of what our real contribution is to this collective field, what our real gifts are that we have to share, because it's here we have a sense of experience, wisdom, and eventual mastery that can then provide the information that we're here to offer in service to others who are also looking to find their way and have not yet found their integration and metabolization of their core wounds and shadow. Right. And so at the practical level, what we'll be doing here in this training is exploring based on our, actually, I'm going to back up one more piece here that I think is important to introduce is in this notion of shadow work. It's like, oh yeah, shadow work is hard, but we need to do it. It's in this deeper integration that there's a much more beautiful and rich experience to be had when it comes to this metabolization, right? And so it's in this devotion, it's in this desire, it's in this commitment to source that we can experience a resource in our bodies. When I am in my alignment and in my truth, there's a deep pleasure that comes from that. And so it's this relationship to pleasure that we're also creating a signal in our nervous system that says, yes, I am ready to receive these. I like to think of them as like fossil fuels, these these condensed, contracted energy deposits of disconnection to source that are woven throughout my system. In the state of pleasure, I can now open and soften to allow these dense forms of latent potential to loosen and begin to move and find their way to the surface. So yeah, shadow work can be hard, but in this process here, what we're doing is we're working with our love and our pleasure, our joy of being in this body at this privileged time and place in history, to be able to make space for what's coming to the surface and to be able to then transform it and receive those charges of energy that they're stored in what seems to be a problem, right? On another note, unlike fossil fuels, it's my personal theory that if we are doing this at a collective level, this is 100% clean energy, and we are actually cooling our systems. And if we're able to cool our systems as an individual, we can begin to cool our systems as a collective. And this whole notion of climate change and global warming and all that, is very much a direct reflection, in my opinion, to all of the inflammation that we're embodying and avoiding in our own systems. And so what we can clean up in our individual process, in our individual bodies, and our individual lives, offers a ripple out effect in our direct immediate world, and then from there. So anyhow, I keep talking about trying to take this back to the practical level, but I think I'm ready now. So the journey throughout these weeks, we will be getting into that inquiry of who am I? And we'll be engaging both the source energy and source awareness in the process. So we'll be engaging both the Shakti Kundalini aspect of this work, as well as the non-dual void, emptiness element as well. And just on the heels of the masters, it's like we are both of these things. We are that alpha and omega polarity, right? And so how we can balance that in ourselves will support this process of inquiry. So getting clear on what it is that makes us alive, getting clear on where these moments are in our lives where we felt like we were thriving, or we felt like we were of highest service, or we felt like we were fully in our essence. Doing an inventory in all of these dimensions and domains where we could feel like we were firing on all cylinders. So I want to get to know these aspects of each of you. Where do you know that you've been in a place of grace, and what was playing out there? Because that gives us some clues as to what is needing reinforcement, continual nourishment, right? Because whether or not, regardless of however clear we see it in ourselves, if it's not fully reflected in our community, it doesn't grow. Right. And so here we're going to be working with the container of the group here to support the mutual reinforcement of each other's becoming. And then from there, the question is, what's in the way? What gets in the way of that? Where do I lose that connection? What are the moments that I felt like I was, flying high and then came crashing down? And we'll do an inventory there too. And based on that, there's two pathways we'll be working. The first is based on my synthesis between my study and practice as a therapist, but also my work as a therapy client in relationship to the activation work. And so the question here is, if there's a part of me that's been triggered, and if we think back to that diagram of the rope and the snake, does everyone remember that? Right. If there's a part of me that's gotten bitten by a metaphoric snake at some point in my development, chances are the earlier it was, the deeper that contraction is in my system. And as I make my way through the world as an adult, the more distorted my perception of the moment is based on that unconscious contraction. And so what we want to do here, it's in this distortion, this delusion that I am somehow separate because of this experience that was unsafe at an early age. What we want to do here is help to activate the neuromuscular structures that are connected to that embodiment. Snake, or snake, whatever it is. Some physiological organization that is continuing to play itself out through our lives at an unconscious level. What we're wanting to do is invite, let's say I was 4 years old and got bit by a snake in the woods. We want to invite little 4-year-old Justin to the table to receive the energy. We want 4-year-old Justin to be doing the practices. We want 4-year-old Justin to have the choice if he wants to receive the energy. Right. And so it's in this way that the parts of ourselves that we have compartmentalized or cut off can start to get the flow of Shakti, can start to get the flow of this nourishment of the Great Mother. Right. And so that's one pathway that we'll be exploring. The other pathway that we'll be exploring is the part of our unconscious that doesn't want to receive that energy. There's a 4-year-old part of me that doesn't want to heal. There's a 4-year-old part of me that would rather the validation of feeling disconnected. Right? Because at one point or another, that part needed that to survive. Right? The story of I'm not enough, or I'm all alone, or no one understands me. All of these unconscious narratives that keep us in between the guardrails of our life path. Each of those provided a ground for our developing system that we needed to be able to know who and where we were. Because for whatever reason, there wasn't adequate holding from our caregivers to provide that ground for us. And so we develop these compensations, and it's these compensations that create the distortions of it's all up to me, or I need to work myself to the bone to have any sense of self-worth, or all of the different ways in which people create what they know to be their personality. But the question is that really who you are, or is that who you're not? Right. And the indicator here is if the belief takes us towards a greater sense of wholeness and connection and helps us to have a direct experience of our oneness with source, then that's an indicator that this is information that is reflective of who we are. If the story takes us further away and has us an experience of feeling disconnected or divided, then that's an indicator that that is some compensatory structure that was adaptive at one point, but is now an obsolete operating system that needs to be deprogrammed. And so in this process, I know there's, a lot of people with a lot of incredible practice and healing experience, and have done a lot of these, have their own experience of healing in a lot of these different directions that I'm talking about here. But what I'm excited about here is what happens when we engage all of this in the playground of the energy. Right, where we can all meet in the sandbox and share our gifts and our toys with each other, and to allow for the not just the experience of the energy as you've experienced it before through the activations, but also being able to lean back into the container of the group here, so that we can feel if I'm talking about the 4-year-old part of me that was bit by a snake and when I was a kid, like there's receiving the energy from source directly, but there's also allowing the container of the group to be my ground that holds me in the process. So in phase 1, we talked a lot about letting the earth hold us completely. In phase 2 here, we're going to lean a little bit more into the group container, not just the earth holding us, but the group holding us. Because of course, it's really all through relationship that a lot of our distortions have, or maybe all of our distortions have come into form. And so this is an opportunity to reprogram a greater sense of trust that's available when the people around us that we're leaning on have their own connection to source. But I'll be getting more into that a little bit later. So just sharing all of this to give you a view into the path ahead, the weeks ahead. And what I want to do today is go into transmission to engage a lot of these themes at a more experiential level. And so we'll have a transmission that's a little bit like a microcosm of the weeks to come. And this will help to kind of prime your system to engage in this inquiry at these different layers that we've discussed. Oh, there's one thing I'm forgetting. When it comes to the part of us that we are, right, when it comes to the part of us that is wanting to preserve the defense or wanting to sustain the shadow, the other thing that we'll be doing is helping to, there's a tremendous amount of life force that we unconsciously exert to perpetuate our division. And so all the ways that we hold us back costs us literal calories. If I'm anxious and my shoulders are tense and I have this story that the world's out to get me, that's a lot of energy that I'm spending on keeping my perspective hyper-focused and vigilant. Even if I'm depressed, I may feel fatigued, but somewhere in the core, there is a gripping that's cutting off the flow of life force. It's like, imagine like a garden hose or a fire hose that has a kink in it. Like there's a lot of potential on one side of the hose and it's completely empty on the other. Right. And so in this process of integrating shadow, what we're going to be doing is learning how to receive the charge, receive the thrill we often get from how we keep ourselves separate, and to be able to take pleasure in that, and to be able to find this. And I say take pleasure, what I'm talking about is to be able to presence the satisfaction we give ourselves, whether that satisfaction could be just the comfort of staying small, right? Learning how to receive that satisfaction often has a way of helping us to no longer need the story, no longer need the trigger, to sustain it. And what I mean by that is, if there's a part of me that believes that he's all alone, I might look for experiences in my life to validate that. I may set myself up for experiences to that reinforce a feeling of alienation, right? Because that feeling of alienation serves a function. It serves a sense of I'm safe here, right? Even if the function is now a dysfunction as an adult, if I can find the satisfaction that my nervous system gets at that unconscious level, I can make that conscious. Right now I can feel satisfaction. Maybe I don't need to isolate myself to get this now. So does that make sense? And to be completely candid and transparent, you know, what we're doing here with phase 2, the way I first did this training was phase 1 and 2 were the same training. This is back in 2020. We went straight from the activation work, self-activation work, into this shadow work. And it was incredible. But what I found is there wasn't enough hard tools that people had to be able to continue to deepen into their own shadow work on their own. Right. And so this training here, I'm putting words to, for the first time, I'm putting words to these different dynamics and themes that have been what has given rise to the source embodiment process. Right. It's through the application of these tools and techniques that I'll be sharing that have given rise to this whole program as I am embodying it. Right. And so it's my intention here to break all of this down and to put it into words in a way that supports the landing and the grounding and the integration at a personal level, but in a way that supports the activation of your shadow work integration. And so if I lose any of you at any point, or it seems like you have another way of saying something that I might be trying to say, you know, definitely want to invite your voice here as more of a collaborative process in general than what you were experiencing in phase 1. So the invitation is open there. Any questions or thoughts or anything you want to riff on from what I've shared so far? No. Okay. So structurally, what we'll be doing is hope to meet with each of you sometime within the next week. If it needs to be the following week, that's fine. And what we're going to be doing is a one-on-one session where I'm going to engage this question of who are you and how are you here to serve, based on your sense of these moments in your life where you've experienced some degree of flow, some degree of grace, some degree of inspiration, integration. And then ask the question, well, what gets in the way of that? What keeps you from living that more fully? And then from there, we're going to explore what the narrative is, what the limiting beliefs are, and support the part of you that feels like it's not getting its needs met, by drawing a path, making the path clear to help that part of you get its source connection. And then we'll also be getting clear on the part of you that doesn't want it and helping us to find the vitality. This is probably a better way that I could explain what I was just trying to say. In any contraction, in any attempt to sustain our shadow, there's a vitality that's being exerted. And so when we can access where that vitality is, where that strength is, even if it's experience of feeling weak or anxious, there's a vitality, a strength in generating that experience, then we can alchemize that energy and bring it into the central channel for you to for to amplify your inquiry of who you are really. Right. And so that's what we'll be doing individually. That doesn't make a lot of sense. You don't really need to worry about it at this point. It'll hopefully make a lot more sense by the time we get through everyone. And then what we'll be doing in the weeks to come is taking, I'm not sure if it'll be 2 people or 3 people a session, but we'll be creating a fishbowl, so to speak, where we'll be, metaphorically, we'll all be sitting in a circle together. And in that circle, one person at a time will step into the center. And I'll meet you there in the center. So there'll be myself and one of you in the center with the rest of the group in witness. And for those that are in witness, what you'll be doing is self-activating, just in the ways that you know how from phase 1. And as you're in that field self-activating, the how do I say? I'll just say the participant, the person in the center, and myself will go into some of that session that we did together. We won't be getting into the story or the narratives about what your personal history or any of those more intimate details, but we will be working with the pathway of from the wound to source. And so you'll get 2 passes, one working personally and one being able to experience it in the field. And what I experienced in the first training is there's 2 things that happen. Everybody gets an experience of what it is to embody this energy in service, being in that supportive outside role. And everybody gets an experience on the inside to feel what it is to be held by source in the form of community, in the form of a group body. And there's something special there that, you know, as a therapist, it's like I do pretty decent work for my clients one-on-one, if I may say so myself, but recognizing it is limited in the sense that it's in this hyper individualistic culture and this silo of it's all happening, it's all up to you, basically. You know, my point here is in a group, when you have that collective field, it's a very different kind of ground that you're leaning back into that supports the healing of this deeper wound of individualism that I think is so strong in Western culture. And so those are the 2 main intentions there. And then throughout the training, we will also have some weekly practices and meditations, guided meditations that I'll make recordings of. For those that were in phase 1, there is a new recording that I'll be offering. I'll be posting it to the whole group, but if you remember the Name That Tune practice, I've since reiterated on that, and it's quite a bit different now, and I'll be posting the content and the instructions in the recording in the Mighty Networks for that. And I'll be also posting like what the instructions are for frequency and regularity for these practices too. So really important to stay up to date with what's going on in the Mighty. But yeah, for those that are, I think it's just Matt and Shri that were in the last one. This is, instead of tuning into like what the song is, we're externalizing our internal experience as if it's somebody knocking on our door. So if it's joy, you know, you say, oh, hello, Joy. I hear you knocking on my door. Good to have you here. Or if it's resistance, it's, hey, resistance, I see you're at my door and I wish you would go away. But since you're not going away, we're going to engage in a conversation. And so it's this externalizing of our and personifying of our internal experience that I found to support the metabolic emotional metabolism, the breaking down of these energies into something that's more more resourcing. Okay. Now this is a mouthful at the beginning. What I'd like to do here, you know, felt like it's important to give a little context to the activation we're going to do in a few minutes. But I feel like this is probably a good time for a short 5-minute break. And if anybody has any questions in the break, feel free to ask. I'll just be here. Great.
All of my morning contemplations were in alignment with everything you just said,
Oh, really?
all the way down to who am I? Okay. In the mirror.
Awesome.
It's always. Good, that's why I'm here.
Me too. And just would appreciate a little bit of feedback here. How does all of that land? You know, does in terms of what your sense is of what this training is about? I know there's some things that I already shared in writing, but in terms of your own, what I'm curious to know is in terms of your own experiences, you know, there's a lot that phase one offered, but there's of course so much that it can't. In terms of your own sense of what more you're seeking from this process, I'm curious how what I shared might be addressing some of your own interests or not. If there's some things that I left out that you're feeling like you would like some time spent on or more guidance on.
So it sounds like to me that you're taking us into more of a collective container space, and in the process of activating it's kind of like two processes going on at the same time, accessing the who am I, what's my purpose, what brings me joy, and simultaneously addressing the what's the core wound, limiting belief stuff standing in the way.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's kind of like you're addressing both simultaneously.
Yeah, so it won't be simultaneously, at least not at first. There'll be a progression. Just as in phase one, there was a steady progression of introducing different elements at different times. There'll be a progression to this as well. And so the intention here, so thanks for asking that question. The intention here is to, there's a couple of different layers here too. So basically, in my understanding of this work having worked with some teachers that were really incredible and really in their integrity, and having worked with some teachers who were not. The question that I would find myself asking myself is how can someone be so connected to source and also be so terrible? And how can someone be so connected to source and be also so incredible? And what I could see in my own journey early on is having powerful experiences of opening, of realization, of communion with God. Earlier on, I could see it kind of spun me out a little bit in this way of giving me a false sense of power that I didn't really have. And there, at the same time, I could see this teacher that I was working with having all kinds of terrible allegations of sexual abuse coming out into the public, and the schism in the community and all this stuff that happened. And it's like, oh wow, like how is it that we could all be so duped? How is it that we all found a trust in this guy? And as my life played out, both in working as a therapist and also my own personal spiritual journey, I realized, oh, if my vulnerability is not reaching for source, my vulnerability is not getting it. Right. And so, and for my vulnerability to reach for source, that means there needs to be a willingness to face the fear of exposing that vulnerability. And it's my belief that any teacher who is using their power for their own gain, exploiting others, causing harm, they're in a position where they've had some wound that, despite whatever adult transformation they've experienced, the medicine or the energy or the source connection hasn't seeped all the way down to that depth of their being. Here in the desert, when it rains, a lot of the water just runs right into the dry rivers, and there'll be flash floods for a day, and then it'll be back to dry, dusty dirt and no time at all. But how do we allow for this energy to really pervade all of the different parts of our being that are committed to staying separate, recognizing that those parts are again, they serve a function, but they're not really who we are. They're fragments stuck in time. Right. And so this process here is a way of you could do phase one and just do phase one and never come back. But if you don't have the pathways clear on how to bring this deeper in, it may never, in this lifetime at least. Yeah. Yeah, there's something else I was going to say based on what you were asking, but does that address or speak to what you're commenting on, Justina?
Yeah, and so it sounds like the application of the activation process / connection energy is really to kind of create or harness that energy to dissipate the wound and the limiting belief.
Not to dissipate. Again, good question. But there's a duality in that perspective, which is that it needs to go away. Right. That it needs to be eliminated. Right. And so within that, it's in a very subtle level, there's a distortion of that's bad. That said, it's not a wrong perspective. And there is some element to that you may experience of something dissipating. But what we're doing is we're releasing it, or we're liberating it. Right. So again, whatever life force, whatever vitality is going into the sustaining of that contraction gets to be reintegrated. So that fragment gets to be brought into the whole. And now the blessing is that we have the wisdom of what the value of that thing once was and the wisdom of how it informs my wholeness. Right. And it's in this way we have more relatability to others in the world who might have some similar contraction in themselves are still working out. Right. So the value, this is, the principle of alchemy, at least in the Western sense, is turning lead to gold. Right. Metaphorically, we're taking this very dense, seemingly low value element and turning it into something that's priceless. Yeah.
Okay. You're applying it in a transmutation.
Yeah, exactly.
Phase 1 and 2 is you were just experiencing it, like allowing the experience and tapping into the experience. And this is more taking the energy or the blockage or the limiting belief and using the activation energy to transmute it.
Yeah. Yeah. And so in this way, we can recognize that the wound is source. The wound isn't separate, right? If all is source, so is the wound. And if we can learn how to receive the nourishment from the wound as if it's the breast of the Divine Mother, then we can see, oh, hey, wow, this is actually really helping me to grow. Oh, hey, wow, this is actually a beautiful gift. And in some ways, the most loving gift I've ever received because of just how much it fuels my evolution. It fuels my awakening. And so this is where I think it's important for me to recognize too. It's like you hear shadow work and it's like, okay, yeah, let's do it. I've got it. I've got this. Like, it's going to be intense, but it'll be better at the end. What I'm hoping for in this process is we can be continuing to celebrate in the joy and the pleasure and the effulgent expression of vitality each step of the way. And sure, there may be moments of discomfort, but there's a very direct balance to those moments. And so that this is, you say like, oh, let's do shadow work. It's like, there's a kind of moroseness that we can kind of take on. It's like, okay, I guess if I have to, I know I've taken on that identity where it's just like kind of the spiritual warrior, but there's no end to that identity, and what we're not saying here is that we need to just the more we suffer, the better the result. That's very much counter to what we're going for here. So just feel like presencing that, because I know that unconsciously that's something that's easy to kind of show up to this kind of thing with. Yeah. Anyone else care to share their thoughts?
When it's not just that from where I come from, it's kind of so opposite to all of these things. Like even when I had this whatever cap and all they were sharing, I found it, why are we talking about, like I was in the ashram meeting, I was there for a year and a half. Not one time anybody asked me what you're feeling. We just did the work, went and cleaned shit, like whatever, went and did karma yoga, had a satsang. There was never any discussion about anything. And the assumption was, if you do the work and you are also integrating it in activity, whatever needs to happen will happen, and whatever fruits have to happen will happen. There is no need to. And so the whole year and a half, we never discussed anything at all, apart from technical stuff, what to do or what not to do. And that's the only conversation we ever had. So even when we had these sharings in this activation stuff, I was like, why are people talking so much? It was already a bit odd for me.
What's your sense of that, having come out the other side of phase 1?
I don't know. I'm still having an ambiguous relationship with it, because sometimes like because again, this is also possibly because that was my first exposure, so whatever I was told, I just became what was the truth. I didn't question, there was no questioning it. So the thing I was told was like these inner experiences, the inner shifts, it's like the roots of the tree, it's hidden, but then the fruits of it is for everybody. But then you don't pluck out the root, and then it distorts it. So even to talk about interior experiences is in a way diluting it or misappropriating it. And the best thing is just to not even bring it out. So, you know, so, and that kind of is not, it was not like and it was my first exposure, and the people were they had very strong presence. So it just imprinted. It is not like something I heard, it was how I saw it, like for a bit. So, but I also noticed like what you just said about the teachers, that also the same people who are transmitting all kinds of stuff are doing funny things. So clearly it's not enough. So
Right. Well, I'm glad you could make that connection. Yeah, I mean, so there's a couple things based on that I think are important to share. One is, you know, what you're speaking to is a great, you know, it gives perfect voice to the inherent limitations in this cult of individualism that we are all, like the rest of us here, are very much conditioned and steeped in, right? The other thing it speaks to is really kind of what we're trying to get to, is go beyond story. I very much relate, like in a lot of like medicine work that I would do, it would be this, you know, sometimes it'd be like 30 people in a group and everyone would share what their experience was like with the ayahuasca the night before, or the weekend before. And oh my God, it was just exhausting. Yeah. But part of it was because there was just like, there was again, like a perpetuation of the story of self, right? And so what we're doing here is we're going beyond the self. But to do that, we first have to acknowledge the we're going beyond little self to big self, but first we have to acknowledge little self to get there. More particularly in Western culture, but not exclusively. Yeah. And so the other thing that I want to share too is at any point along the way, you know, Shri, if you're feeling like, what are these Americans talking about? Bring it in, because it gives us all a very valuable perspective on just how arbitrary our personal narrative can be.
And here, I think it's much better. Like I had couple of experiences in a dance kind of a thing, and there like the session was an hour and a half, and then the discussion went 3 hours, and it seemed to never end. I didn't know what to do there. Yeah.
Yeah, that's the main reason I didn't go too far with them, to be honest. Yeah. Yeah, I would get to the group shares and then sign off. But based on that too, it's my hope that, you know, I'm doing what I can to make the group shares more engaging and more opportunities to practice, even in the sharing, rather than the simple deluge of narrative content. Thanks for bringing that in. Appreciate it. Okay, so we're going to be.
Can I just share real quick on that point? There's an interesting thing for anybody who's ever interested in being a teacher. It's important to get to hear all the different ways that it shows up. Because as a personal practitioner, there's your experience. You don't need to hear other people's experience or even necessarily share your own to have the fruit of that. But if you ever really want to help other people, you need to understand the ways that the same energy shows up totally differently across other people and how they have experiences and interpret them differently. And so there's that. It's a different element. And in addition to what you already shared about our culture.
Sure. Yeah. And at the same time too, as a facilitator, I find it to be my responsibility to reinforce ways of sharing that are generative for the whole, rather than just have a transcendental non-dual reunion connection to source and then come back and talk about what that has to do with me. You know, of course, there's a balance. It's definitely an art form. Yeah. Great. So let's just take a minute here and stretch it out, shake it out. Come into our bodies here. Taking a deep breath in and squeezing the feet, the hands, everything else in between. In the inhale, letting it all out. Exhale. Doing that a couple more times. Ah. Mm. And so here we're just opening up to this activation, which is also phase 2 initiation. The transmission that will be coming through in this process, adding a different layer, another layer of complexity to what we've already established from phase 1. And just starting out here, connecting to the center of your heart, connecting to that natural yearning, the natural desire, the natural longing that we all share here to know ourselves, connected to source, receiving from source, relating with source, living as source. I'm just feeling that pulse. That impulse to be. From one heartbeat to the next. From one breath to the next. Does this heartbeat want to beat again? Yep. How about now? Yep. Still going? Yep. Just getting curious, what allows for this mystery of life to move through me? What allows for this breath of life to breathe through me? And of course, there is this supportive source but where is that? Where is it coming from? What direction? So just finding whatever gratitude you can find, putting a hand on your heart or your womb. Thank you, great mystery. Thank you, Creator, for choosing this form, this time and place. And of course, this heartbeat sustained by the earth, allowing that gratitude to expand to include the earth. Feeling yourself held in gravity, all points of contact, the surface beneath you. Perfect balance, gravity, not so heavy. You're smushed to the ground, not so light that you're just flying off into the solar system. Thank you, Earth, for this support. Thank you for this balance. Thank you for the water I drink, food that I eat, clothing and shelter. Keep me warm, protected. All of my relations. Keep me company. We create meaning together. And in this frequency of gratitude, the electromagnetic field of the heart expands. And the frequency of gratitude, the frequency of the heart synchronizes to the frequency of the earth. And in this conversation between the body of the earth, the body of ourselves, just allowing this interaction to transmit itself out into space. To also include the sun. Hey, sun, thanks for your support. Thanks for holding us in the solar system. Opening, receiving the warmth and the light of the sun, same way you receive the support of the earth. Just as we're held by the earth, earth is held by the sun. And we spiral together, making our journey through the Milky Way. As the Milky Way expands out, making its journey through the rest of space, along with all the other galaxies of creation. And so connecting to space. Connecting to the stillness and silence. Vastness, emptiness of space. Receiving from stillness, silence, and space. Relating with stillness and silence and space. Stillness and silence and space there in the center of the heart, in between each pulse, each breath. Stillness and silence and space all around us, in between each cell of our body, each atom. I'm just getting curious here. Who am I? What am I? And who or what is asking? And this vast emptiness, there in the center of our heart, the space between every atom, the space between every galaxy. Including the awareness of this vulnerable, powerful, willing impulse to be. With our hearts pumping one beat to the next. Including presence and awareness of the vulnerable, powerful, willing impulse to be. Every cell in our body. Held by the earth and the sun. Held by the Milky Way. Each cell held together by the vulnerable, powerful, willing impulse to be. Perfect amount of tension and looseness to allow for life force to express itself. To allow for stillness, silence, and space to express itself. In the form of this body. On this planet. In this time and place. Who am I? in this body? What am I in this body? Who's asking in this body? What am I doing here on this planet, in this body? Who's asking? Just noticing what it feels like to be here, this moment, held in the suspension, suspended and held in the inquiry. What ways does the life force manifest? What's the quality and the experience of stillness, silence, and space suspended in the question? Really receiving from this. Receiving the nourishment from the question itself. Freedom in not knowing. Freedom in the expression of curiosity and wonder. And reconnecting here to whatever level of interest, desire, longing, curiosity there is. To want to know, who am I? What am I really? In this form, on this planet? And who's asking? And from this moment, allowing this question to expand across time and space, going both directions, from past to future. Who have I been? Who am I becoming? As this vulnerable, powerful, willing impulse to be has, is, and continues to express itself throughout this lifetime. Throughout all lifetimes. And in this lifetime, where and when has this sincere, willing impulse to be had the opportunity to express. And so, like, we're opening up the file of our life, or we have a video of everything that's ever happened from 9 months before day one to this moment. Where has this willing impulse to be shown through? Shined through, sung through, the density of human form, physical form. And just noticing what moments, what memories emerge. What were you doing? In the memory, what are you doing? Calling the memory of the past forward to the present, letting it play out now. What are you doing in these memories? Who are you with? Where are you? In the expression of spirit, expressing through body. Expressing through form. And receiving the joy of life, receiving life. Receiving the gratitude, the pleasure, the thrill, the satisfaction. Source singing through you across time and space. Thank you, Spirit. For expressing myself. Despite the obstacles, the resistance, the density. Thank you, light, for shining through me. Despite the shadows. I get to express the sincere, willing impulse to be. as a spirit of light. As the form, as the body, as the voice, ears, eyes, nose, mouth, flesh of source. Connecting to, receiving from, relating with. Being as source. And as source, just as natural as is my revelation. Just as natural as is my expression and expansion. Is my contraction and concealment. Who am I in my contraction and concealment? Who am I in darkness? Who am I in the obscuration of my vast infinite potential through physical form, through the contraction of physical form? Conflict with physical form. And so here, remembering across time and space, the moments where I forget to ask who I am. Calling these memories forward to the present. Allowing the human expression of disconnect and division, separation and suffering. To be remembered. Feeling in this separateness. And the other moments in your life where that vulnerable, powerful, willing impulse to be was silenced, ignored, dissociated, or denied. And appreciating the tension, the not having, the longing and the wanting. As reminders of where we've been and where we're going. And from the remembering of this vulnerability, the sincere, willing impulse to be, asking the wounded, the hurt, the isolated, suffering, separate parts, if they would like to receive a taste of source. And waiting, and listening, however quiet the whisper may be. If that appetite is there. And for how much? And feeling and that willing impulse to be, the vitality in between heartbeats. Drawing in naturally, effortlessly, from one pulse to the next. The source available to nourish, to heal, to restore, and replenish. The absence of source. into fullness. Pulse by pulse. Drip by drip. Drop by drop. Allowing the wounded the separate, exiled, and rejected parts to SIP on what little or however much of the stillness, silence, and space, the vitality and life force they want. Taking in what you can, letting the rest spill over. Savoring what you can, enjoying the joy, liking the like, grateful for gratitude. Allow any resistance, receiving only what we can. Giving the rest to the earth. Who am I? Who am I? With my hungry mouth fed. Who am I? With my hungry belly full. Who am I in my disconnect, my concealment, my contraction. Who am I if I'm held by the earth, held by the sun, held in the stillness and silence and space? Who am I if I receive my source connection, that which is greater than me, that has created me, continues to sustain me? Who am I? What am I? Who do I get to be? With all parts of me fed and nourished. And how am I here to serve? With all parts of me fed and nourished. As source, how do I breathe through me? As source, how does my heart beat through me? In this human form, with this human life and human story. And just allowing ourselves to be suspended in inquiry. What am I? Who am I becoming? Following the momentum and trajectory of my soul's journey thus far. With all parts of me fed and nourished. By source, as source. Where are we going? I am the cup running over. The snowy mountains melting. Water running downstream. nourishing the valleys. That all seeds planted may grow. What seeds have been planted? What seeds are growing? Finding whatever gratitude is available, whatever appreciation or enjoyment. Letting yourself enjoy it. Grateful for gratitude. I get to ask these questions. I get to wonder. I get to allow this to breathe through me, the heartbeat through me. Tend to these seeds and watch them grow. Each exhale, a death, each inhale, a rebirth, an opportunity to begin again. Life and death, every moment, every breath. What's being born through me now? Very slowly, in your own time, in your own way. Taking a sip of light through your eyes to receive this new day. And however much is enough, feel free to close them again. Letting this realm of possibility fill your heart and your belly. And with eyes open, asking again, who am I? What am I? Here in this 3D world. And source streaming through me. Who am I here to be? What am I here to do? In this 3D world. As stillness, silence, and space. As the embodiment of this overflowing vessel of abundance, embodiment of the joy of enjoyment. The gratitude for gratitude. That I get to ask these questions. With each of us here in the group. And so without disconnecting, Christina, Amy, if you're able to find your way back here to the group here, just seeing what it's like to be seen, feeling what it's like to be heard. Amy's asleep, so I'm gonna bless her with. Just finding our way back to the group here. And just feeling what it's like to be on this journey together. Who are we here to be? How are we here to serve in our separate lives and here together as a community? And by no means am I asking for an answer. And by no means in this moment am I asking for a definition. But just in this moment here, calibrating, what's it like to have gone on this journey, however deep it or light it may have been for you, and to now be back looking at other people. Whoa. Right? How do we find our equilibrium here in relationship? How do we maintain our alignment here by reaching into our center? Do I lose the thread? Do I dampen it because I feel like I should? Do I want to? Living yourself the choice here right now. How you want to show up. What plane of focus you want your attention to be. You want it outside of you on the screen, or do you want to allow the people here that we're connected to be received by stillness, silence, and space, by source awareness and energy? Just calibrating. Leaning forward, leaning back, twisting side to side, bringing a little bit of movement into our systems here. Who's stretching? Who's asking? Who's seeing? Who's being seen? In this moment here, as we transition, just tuning in, checking in. Where's that pathway? That hungry, starving, neglected part? Is that pathway still there? Can we make sure they still get a little bit of this slow drip, so they're not forgotten? And so shifting gears, one more layer of being, just finding our way up to a standing position. Just connecting to source here, energy and awareness. Feeling what it's like to receive upright with our adult faculties online. Letting the body move how it needs to move. Transmission still flowing. Activation still activating. Eyes closed, asking, who am I? Who am I here to be? How am I here to serve? In this form, animated, with agency, the ability to sway side to side or stand still, the ability to flop around or coordinate movement. He's bending at the knees, just a little squat, flexing the arms, and inviting in that one who needs a little more agency. Inviting in that one who feels a little more disconnected, a little less access to source. Letting them have some choice of movement. Hand in the heart, hand in the belly. It's finding that one in ourselves that needs a little more care, a little more attention, compassion. Connecting to, receiving from source energy. Letting the field expand. Moving with, being as source energy, expanding further still, letting that overflow find its way to the plate, to all the plates of all of our separate selves. Making sure all parts of us are fed, if they want it. They get to choose. There's no should here. Receiving whatever little crumb or full meal they wish from this fullness here. Letting them ask and letting them be heard, letting them reach, letting them receive. Not depriving them of the privilege of reaching just by stuffing something down their throat. Empowering the reach, empowering the longing. So from this place here, finding whatever part of you might feel like it needs a little more something and letting them put their hands out. Slowly, very slowly, experimenting. What's it like to extend into the world while receiving source connection? What's it like to return your hands full of connection, placing them back on your heart and your belly? And again, if there's still an appetite for more, just allowing that appetite to extend. I'd like a little more, please. Feeling what that's like in the back of the heart. What happens in the legs? Thank you. I'd like to take this in now and feed myself. And just one more time. Any desire or longing for a little more connection to source? And that be what animates the reach. And then the fullness and the offering, bringing it back in. And that fullness and that gratitude, anything you have left over, allowing it to spill out, the hands out. Letting it find its way out into the space that we're in, into the world that we live, finding its way to anyone you know or anything you know that benefit from access to its own source connection. And finding its way out further still. All beings across time and space, into each of their parts. So all beings may be happy, free, whole, nourished, and connected to source. Thank you, everyone. Let's take another 5-minute break. Find our way back here. So it'll be on the 33-minute mark. Welcome back, everyone. How's it going out there? Curious to hear how that was for everyone. So with the transition from the first half to the second half of the first training I did, how do I say, there's only so much time. So this, I haven't done this before, what we just experienced together. So curious to hear your feedback and what that was like for you. Or what's still happening as well. You know, if there's something still moving through you want to give voice to. And again, always just to whatever's going to support your integration here.
I really appreciate the thing you said about the shadow part being source as well. And like the greatest gift. And then just how with that sort of awareness, the whole practice and field that it's like expanded and different from level 1. So I just appreciated it a lot. It felt like a really natural, gradual evolution of the work we've already been doing.
Beautiful, thanks.
Okay, thanks. I'm finding the meditation was deeply resonant with my contemplations this morning about contemplating what I want more of in my life. And this morning there was a part of me looking out and not blaming, but like, I'm not getting this from the people. And then that was just like, no, this is my shadow projecting that onto them this morning. I like had this moment that this my block that's not receiving. And right now I just have this soothing. So it was something I was contemplating already. And so now I have this just kind of like soothing energy just flowing through my entire system. It's a calming sort of just like this, I don't know, water flowing just softly through my system. Yeah. That I'm in the right place too. Yeah.
My approach normally to practice of any of this kind, it's very visceral. So I always usually have a challenge with this inquiry and words kind of stuff. So what was different today was I kind of experienced these questions like sensation, so it kind of clicked in that way. Also in terms of responses, like, I don't know, at some point you were kind of mentioning to connect with gratitude of having the opportunity to ask questions, and hands started clapping. And so it also kind of brought in the thing that there is more than me in play. Something else is also, like, I think I'm participating in this, but somebody or something else also participating in responding. So, I cannot locate it right now, but definitely something is involved.
Yeah, great. And just appreciating the value of having the share is that there's layers here that each of us are speaking to. Chris was speaking to like the value of having the being able to engage like even the shadow as source. What you're speaking to here, Sri, is that yes, from a conceptual place, a question is conceptual, but the embodiment of conceptualism is a narrowing and a projecting of circulation up to the head, right? When we get into this place of feeling the natural impulse for that heart to want to take that next beat, right? Then we can begin to feel the what it is to have a question at a more visceral level, right? And so that what you're experiencing there is exactly where I want this to go, but I wouldn't have been able to articulate it unless you just share what you did, which is that this question is a full body question, not like a I wonder what I want to be when I grow up, right? I just remember having, when I had COVID, there was a sense of like, oh, my body has a real question about how to navigate this. My body does not know how to interface with this being in the way that it does a cold or a flu. And it was a really interesting moment to be in this place of like, oh, I could see how if I was older or less healthy, how it could kill me. But there was a sense of just like, fortunately I had enough strength and youth and vitality and access that I could just wait it out and let my immune system do its thing. But there was a moment there and my lungs were getting all congested. It's like, oh, my lungs don't know how to handle this. And so it's a similar kind of thing where it's just like, what is this life? Unfortunately, life itself is not a pathogen. So we don't have this, although for some people it can be autoimmune disorders, right? But in either case, it's like, how do I interface with this moment in a place of leaning into and this is something you're speaking to, the higher level intelligence that is here making these calculations about what to take in and what not, what to preserve and what to release, that's why we ask the question, who's asking? Because it gets out of the story of what does my ego think I should be, and what does my ego think I should do? And this is where, I know you're talking about when we did the non-dual transmission that you jumped in on, that was a little less, it was a little harder to connect to.
Yeah.
Because it's not as tactile. But what's coming through in this training here that's different is a much higher level of interactivity, a much higher level of interaction and engagement and negotiation with the energy. Whereas phase one is just, can I connect to it? Can I connect to it when I want to? So this phase two is very much more about the connecting with layer. We're kind of going more into that. So, and then to speak directly to what you're sharing about this other intelligence coming in, it's this alignment with the much deeper impulse and current of life that is creating this dimension that we live in. Right. So what I'm getting from what you're sharing, what I'm inferring rather, is that the scaffolding that we laid in place in phase one allows for a certain bandwidth of information to come through. We just installed new scaffolding, right? And so now there's another upgrade in terms of the depth of information that is able to come through as we connect to these points of awareness, which is, before it was just connecting to the felt sense in the body, to from with as. Now we're going outward a little bit more, and so that which will come through, that which is coming through will be, I want us all to consider this like with this activation today, it's like we just sent an invitation, a love letter to our higher self. We've maybe only met once or twice, or not at all. Right. And so now that this invitation is extended, our higher self is saying, oh, all right, I'm game, and so letting the next few weeks that unfold really just be a much deeper inquiry. And I'll get more into this. I think I'm getting ahead of myself a little bit, putting the cart before the horse before I hear from everybody, but this will be pointing towards what we'll be doing for practice in the next week. So
even in the questions like, what does it want, how it unfolds, so there was a kind of a participation with it, like the whole body was kind of, because earlier when something happened, it just, like for example around Sadhguru or something, he would sometimes make a sound, and then immediately there was something from inside of me, which is not me as I know me, would respond back to him. And it felt like something really old, but it was so far back, there was no interactivity with it because it was so primordial. I have no way of relating to it apart from the enjoying it in that moment. But then it is so moved from what I think of me that I can't, nothing to do with it. Like it's just okay.
Right. And it's pre-human in a way. Right?
Yeah.
maybe even pre-Earth. But this is where we engage the relational pathways to build that scaffolding so we can close that gap. Yeah,
Thank you.
that's the language of humanity. Yeah, great.
I can share. Yeah, I'm grateful to be in the space and to get to be in the meditation in the times when you invited us to go to the more fragmented or wounded place. I had some good shame that I felt that I was able to just feel and kind of metabolize and let it wash through my body. And it was in connection to memories that were not new, but I feel like in the group field and with the energy, I was able to get like a deeper layer of feeling in there. So thanks. Yeah.
Awesome. Yeah. Yeah, of course. I mean, like I said earlier, there's a lot of us here who have done, I think probably all of us here have done our fair share of work, right? But what is it to let this medicine wash over it? You know, beautiful.
So I was in like a liminal state for a lot of it, and I definitely feel a lot of energy and shift in my body, but I was not really consciously participating with much of the journey.
Mhm.
So what I'm curious about is like, what do you think about repeating that on the recording for me, or should I just like wait and see what is working?
I would suggest doing it again sooner rather than later.
Yeah.
I mean, you could just like in the state that you were in, where I saw you, like it could probably take a few weeks for it to integrate if you didn't watch the recording again. I think if you watch the recording again, it would integrate a lot more solidly and a lot faster.
Great. Okay. Yeah, I will do. I definitely just like feel a lot, but yeah, it's a question of the role of agency.
Yeah, and I would play with if you find yourself going back into that with your losing some agency, just do it with your eyes open.
Okay.
And like out in nature or in some space that is like that you can be a little bit more interactive with, that feels nourishing. Yeah.
I had a really funny moment. My my shadow parts, when you were like asking them would they like to sip from the light, or they were like very vocal, and they were like, hell yeah, you've been hogging all that light for yourself this whole time. And I've never heard them speak like that before. I mean, when I do shadow work, they don't really respond to me. So it was just kind of funny that, well, I actually know this because when I was doing some work with male prisoners, they did this whole art show, and what was so profound to me is they did all this. It was really spiritual. They would draw all these pictures or paintings, but there were all these like messages on their artwork that was like basically asking for the light to help them, that they were trapped or lost or forgot. Yes, it was the shadow, and they gave voice to their shadow. So it was this beautiful art show. So it's just funny that I heard my own shadow parts, like, or disowned parts, like talking today. Same message.
That's great. Yeah, for me, there is a sense of, it's been a little while since I have engaged these themes fall of 2020. And of course, since then, you know, I've had quite a lot of rich life experience to, it's been a while since I've shared these teachings, but it's also had a lot of time to engage them at a personal level. And to be working this circuitry in myself much deeper than I had 2.5 years ago. And leading up to this session today, I was thinking, oh, this will like thinking about like the boxes that I need to check and thinking like having a sense like, yeah, there's going to be a lot of new things that weren't in that. And so I just need to find a way to weave them all in. But kind of thinking of it as just like something that I've done before. And in what came through, you know, there's just a much deeper level of kind of being able to see what's the architecture that's beyond the blueprint, if that makes sense. Like I came into this session today having a sense of the blueprint. And done what we just did, I now have a sense of the structure. And with what you're speaking to, Shri, about having the sense of something else that's greater than me, right now what I'm feeling is it's like sounds weird, but it's almost as though like I could have the sense of this energy over my shoulder that's wanting the invitation to take its seat in me and be able to express itself through this form. These words are totally reducing the experience, but there's a sense of like, this is I'm just going to say this, it sounds like it wants to use me as a puppet, but not in a weird, creepy way. Like more in like let's party together kind of way. And so there's just a lot of excitement around that and curiosity around that. And it's in my understanding of what's happening here is it really is just my own higher intelligence. It's not as though I'm about to be like hijacked by some, you know, some disembodied avatar, although who knows? Yeah.
We'll find out.
We'll find out, totally. Yeah. Yeah. But the other side to it though is it's not just me, like I can feel it for all of you too. It's like there's like this yeah, there's as much as I can feel that depth expanding in myself, I'm feeling like I'm receiving it from each of you as well. Yeah. And then it's this interesting kind of game that we're playing of like, oh, let's pretend we're not Source and take on the form of Justin as this dude, you know. And it's like, oh, sorry, Chris, I see you. You're just as much Source as I am. You know, I'm not gonna go along with the story or whatever. So I'm kind of just rambling here. Go ahead, Chris. You're gonna say something?
So that there's this like moment when you're like, and who's asking? And like, it's your voice, you know, asking in the moment. And then there's this relationship of like, oh, there's no separation here about this is me asking myself with a different voice. And so there was some of that during the session where I was like, oh, wow, this is cool.
Totally. Before we transition here, how was it to go from, I'm curious to hear from people what the transition was like. You know, when I was calling us back to open our eyes and eventually stand up, what that process was like for people. I mean, I had the sense that we could have just stayed in that space for another hour, but with the time and everything else needed to land the plane. But I'm just curious, you know, the intention is to give people, bring people back into the neuromuscular embodiment of having adult agency, as opposed to just blowing everybody open and leaving them there. Because even though the transition may be rough in the meditation, I could guarantee the transition is going to be way rough if I were to leave people in that space and let life itself be where you have to try to find that equilibrium. I mean, based on those intentions, I'm curious to know, to get some feedback from each of you, what the transition was like. Because I can still feel like some of us are still in that space, which is fine. But yeah, curious if it was abrupt, if it felt like you were able to bring your treasures back with you, or if you lost some in the process.
It felt really smooth for me. I felt like really integrated and aware. It was like bringing, yeah, the meditative space into my, yeah, there's just like a positive integrative aspect that I appreciated.
Justin, since you're asking for feedback, one thing is for your Zoom, when you were playing your drum, it filtered out most of the drumming sound.
Oh, really? It's a bummer. I had it on music's settings.
So just so you know.
Yeah.
And I appreciated getting to stand up. That felt good in my body.
Great.
Yeah, I think even the volume, like I had to put it on the speaker and get the speaker up to my ear, because I don't know, it's also maybe the state, like when you get into that, then also your capacity to translate words slows down or gets fuzzier, and then the volume also was a bit. So I couldn't so maybe there's a way of increasing that, at least.
We'll just have to test it next time, because I mean I have it set to original sound for musicians just for that specific reason. But yeah, thanks for that feedback. Yeah.
And for me also the transition actually was much more like the gap between the place and opening the eyes was lesser today than, let's say, when we do the things before. It was closer somehow. It didn't seem like there was so much gap.
Yeah, great.
Yeah, I thought for me, the pace transition was fine. And it was distracting with the sound issues. That was like you can hear the drum when you talk, but then you can't hear it. So it almost became kind of like noise. And there was also a volume issue, which I was trying to think if you have the volume issue when you play music, which I think there was more of a volume issue today.
Yeah. Interesting. Okay. Yeah, next time something like that happens, someone just feel free to send me a little note in the chat and I'll make the adjustment. Yeah.
The moving to standing was like kind of heavy, but also really, when I say heavy, like it just felt very heavy, and it was because of the state that I was in, but it also felt smooth and like feeling the circulation happening in different places in my body because of it.
Great. Cool. Okay, everyone. Practice this week. I'm not sure if I'll do an edit of the video or I'll just make its own separate recording, but essentially just getting into the first part of the recording where we just get into the who am I, like from connecting to the earth and connecting to the sun all the way up to asking the question. And my encouragement here is just to let that be in the background, for the rest of the course of who am I and how am I here to serve. And there'll be a couple things to consider here. There's the one-on-one sessions that we do. I'd like to get everybody's astrology info, your birth date and place. Actually, I mean, I actually, now that I think about it, I actually already posted a link on the Muddy network of a system called Gene Keys, and it gives you a free profile. So if you could go in there, put in that information, get your profile and upload it to that same page in the comments section, or if that's too confusing, just putting it on the feed. This will be important information for us before our one-on-one session. So please do that. And if we haven't, I think it's just, there's a few of us that we haven't scheduled yet with. But if you haven't given me the times that work for you, please send me a message sooner rather than later, sometime between this week and next, where we can meet one-on-one. And yeah, last but not least, there is a suggested reading section on the Mighty Network. The practice that we'll be doing, where we're learning how to alchemize the vitality that goes into our resistances and our defenses and our shadow. There's a book in there called Existential Kink that speaks really well to that process. We'll be referencing it. If you feel inclined to want to dive into that, it's a good one. There are some elements of it that are not relevant to this training. So, you know, I would say, like, it's definitely not the Bible of this training. It's just a point of reference. Yeah. Alrighty. Thank you all. That was a lot of fun. Yeah, really excited and inspired to see what we have in store for us.
Thank you.
Thanks, Justin. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you. See you all online.